There's a real that's going on in college sports right now. It's not just athletes pay, it's who's in charge. Penn State won a national championship last year, still lost $37 million. Penn State's carrying more than $500 million in athletics related debt, generates over $1 billion annually in economic impact from athletics, and still runs a deficit. This isn't just about winning, and it's not just about paying athletes. College sports now looks and behaves like a professional industry where athletes are compensated, coaches make millions, media deals are worth billions, but it's still housed inside of nonprofit universities and governed like a loose association. And then this match may be the real story of interest and why I'm interested in it. And on Monday, the University of Louisville leadership, including trustee Larry Benz, published an op-ed arguing the current system is structurally unsustainable, needs reform that may require congressional action, a real governing body in a hard spending cap. At the same time, the SEC and Big Ten Commission and FTI study arguing that reforms like polling media rights nationally are, quote, dangerously unworkable. So what's really going on here? Is it a sustainability crisis, a power struggle over media rights, a free market sorting itself out, or a coordination failure that requires structural governance? And it's my privilege today to be joined by the trustee and chairman of the board at the University of Louisville, and also someone who I'm fortunate enough to call my dad. Larry, welcome.
Thank you. A pleasure to be here.
So let's get into it, right? You all put out a really interesting, I think, op-ed. You had a post on your own. Just help inform us of what's going on here in college athletics and maybe why, more people should care, not just in athletics, but the school, the constituents, the student, faculty, staff, the fans, right? The cities and people that ultimately benefit from our institutions.
Yeah, so let's unpack this a bit. You have to kind of take the pre-House settlement, which was the time, the decision that allowed you to pay student athletes, and post. There was also an intermediate time where things were really out of control as well, but let's just use that as a line of demarcation. Prior to the House settlement, you had a free labor force. And so revenues that came into your athletic department for the Power Four, Power Five at that time tended to be roughly equal to your budget. In some cases, you lost a little bit. Some cases, you made millions. At the University of Louisville, we used to make more money off basketball than we did football. All that changed during the time of the House settlement, where you had the decision was to pay student athletes, and yet you had a defined time period between when the House settlement actually went into effect. Technically, it didn't go into effect last July, and technically right now, every college is supposed to sign a participation agreement, and that appears to be in danger, which is a rabbit hole that let's not even go down for right now. And during that time, the reality is the college football playoff system has gotten incredibly inviting from a revenue and making money standpoint. Now, here's the reality. There are about 3 or 4 economic things that I don't think the average person who follows college athletics understands, or maybe they do at varying levels. Point number 1 is that college football is the American sport. It is got an incredible following. People's desire to watch it at every level. I love watching Mac Nation in Tuesdays of November because I know it's going to be on a Tuesday, and there's nothing else I'd rather watch on a Tuesday than college football. So every conference is involved in this. The conferences that have traditionally had the highest media rights have been the SEC and the Big Ten. They have about 67% of all the media rights. And so the media rights have gotten quite a bit bigger. At the University of Louisville, I remember when they were insignificant. Now they're 30, 40, 50 million. At the Big Ten and the SECs, they're approaching 70 to $80 million per team per year. That's serious money. Just 10, 15 years ago, that was bigger than anybody's budget. However, the House settlement basically allowed schools to spend $20.5 million in rev share. In other words, it was based on a percentage of the revenue mathematically, and that's what they came up with, was 20.5 million. The following year was 21 million. But that's not really what the cap is. Well, the school says, to the vendors, don't pay me, just do direct NIL. Well, NIL is on top of the $20.5 million, and it is unlimited. But the reality is coming from the school's budgets, because if you don't win in football, you're not going to make more money by media rights. And the college football playoff system is very lucrative financially. And so football rules all of that to the disdain or to the detriment of the average student athlete. NIL has harmed more kids than it's helped. NIL has really hurt the gender equity in the Olympic sports. They're now playing in regional areas. They're not getting to travel as much. There'll be a cut in scholarships. All of those things matter. And so this is a complex problem that is going to run out soon in terms of its sustainability, because the schools are not going to be able to take general fund dollars and move it from academics to sports, nor should they. And so we have to get revenues increased by pooling and getting rid of the Radio Broadcast Act and pooling our ability. There's estimates that we can get an additional $4 to $7 billion if we pool our media rights. So if the SEC and the Big Ten have 67% of the current media rights, the math would suggest that quite possibly they might get 67% of a larger number. And that would be a rising tide for every conference. Put in the MAC conference, put in the HBCs. Everybody, nobody wins unless everybody wins. All college athletes must win, in our opinion, and in the opinion of much in the way of leadership. Yeah, so part of it is, if you look at media rights, the NFL blows everybody away internationally, nationally. Second is the NBA. But a third in terms of eyeballs is college football. But eyeballs, which should convert to dollars, doesn't. The college ends up being seventh, eighth, or ninth. If we pool, and why is that? Because every conference negotiates their own media rights. Big Ten does theirs, SEC does theirs, the ACC does theirs, the Big 12 does theirs, the MAC does theirs. If you put all those and you said, we're going to negotiate these as one of the college football, 130 schools, whatever the number is, we're going to negotiate directly. Then you have streaming services like Amazon, Netflix, who are really in the game now. And so if you really take it, we're missing out on a lot of dollars on the revenue side, but that's only part of the equation. The other part of the equation is the expense. And so the NFL has the best NIL available. As you recall, only a few very small minority of NFL players get NIL or get endorsements. In college right now, tons of student athletes get endorsements, and without their college jersey on, nobody even knows who they are. And so what we have to do is go to a rational system that is what I call a hard cap, meaning the 20.5 million is what the school's soft cap is. NIL is on top of that. And NIL really isn't coming from donors or vendors. In some cases, it's coming some from vendors, but it's really come from the schools. So schools are having to succumb more and more financial losses. So if you go to a hard cap, and let's say it's $21 million, the NFL has a hard cap. That doesn't mean every school has to spend the hard cap. It just means that's what the cap is. And then if Adidas or if a vendor, Gatorade, wants to directly contract with a kid for NIL, let them. That's what the NFL does. And we got to stop the workarounds. We got to stop, and it isn't cheating. These are legal workarounds that appear. They're like the tax law. People find ways and loopholes that are not illegal. And that's what's happened in college sports. If you don't do that, the losses to the university accumulate, and those losses take the form of decreased scholarship, decreased opportunities, gender equity, sports being on the way down, and less competitiveness. Any additional dollar that a school has to pay to athletics for their losses is taken away from scholarships, student success, and other areas where it could be deployed. Now you say, well, why should we fund athletics? And well, the reason is you've got an economic boom. We've calculated, had an independent study done that showed that our economic impact at the University of Louisville is $1.5 billion a year. Okay, now we're bearing all the cost of that. So we subsidize it through the school. And yes, fans do pay for seats. Fans do pay more and more for concessions. They absolutely do. But that doesn't, withstand the 20, 30, $40 million a year in losses that you have. And so these are public institutes where you have to ask the real question is, what is their purpose? Yeah, athletics are an important part. They're the heart and soul and the window to a university. But the reality is we have to fund student success. We have to fund opportunities and scholarships and endowments for faculty and staff and things that really make a university run. That's a real issue for universities, and the private universities just subsidize it even greater. They just don't have to release their figures and statistics publicly. So athletics creates an economic impact that the schools are having to subsidize. That money takes away from other things. And that's the real messages. And the third part of solving this, by the way, and so you have you have the revenue, the media rights, and that's going to take a legislative act of Congress to get rid of the Radio Broadcast Act. You have a hard cap. And then a third, leg of that stool is governance. You have to have a governing body that has teeth. The NCAA is primarily ruled by fear of litigation or getting sued. They're in and out of lawsuits all the time. They've been extremely ineffective in their governance style. The College Sports Commission, equally so. So you have to have a true governance platform. So we have to put a limit on it and squash it and get to some real reform here soon, structural reform that benefits all college athletes, not just the Big Ten and the SEC or some cherry pick group, just because they happen to be right now generating more media rights in their particular conference. We have to take a holistic view, a collaborative view that benefits everybody. Like I said, nobody wins unless all college athletes win in all conferences.
Yeah, very good. And do you think that the NCAA is positioned to do that, or do you think who knows what a different governing body, or is it how the conferences collectively come together, or is it a different governing board, or like how do you get to a resolution? And who takes the initiative to figure it out?
I think it takes a new governing board. I don't think the NCAA can effectively administer at this stage. I think the genie has been out of the bottle a little too long. Doesn't mean they don't have any role at all in college athletics. I just think to effectively govern, you're going to have some board come together where it has broad representation of the conferences and of experts who can deal with this. There are, you look at 17, 18-year-old kids are not getting the NIL money or the rev share money because it's a lot more strategic. The data will tell you to get a 22 and a 23-year-old. Indiana won it with the most mature football team in the NCAA. That was a good strategy on their point. But who is at disadvantage? A 17 and 18-year-old five-star kid.
Right.
But that allows them to say, we want to get 18% of the revenues, and that 18% becomes the hard cap, which is exactly how it's done in professional sports. What we have is college athletics being a professional sport without professional governance, without checks and balances, and without boundaries. And so right now it's a runaway freight train that is only wrecking the economics of all the schools that are involved. When you have an Ohio State losing that kind of money, when you have LSU, Alabama, these schools getting $70, $80 million in media rights, losing millions of dollars a year, Penn State, most over-leveraged group next to maybe Florida State. These are serious dollars at public universities.
Right.
I think if nothing changes, I predicted last year there'd be about a 2 to 3 year runway, meaning that's the last time boards, athletic associations are going to allow their schools to subsidize their athletic departments that much through student fees, through general funds, and otherwise. And most are already saying no. So the athletic departments are just simply borrowing more money. And when that happens, they'll have to spend less, which make them less competitive. And at the same time, cut sports and have an athletic department that is much more, accountable relative to its profit and loss. And if that happens, less spending, less scholarships, less competitiveness, all the things that would go with it. So I think that's got about another season or two left in it. And then the last piece again is just hard cap on the spending. So governance has to happen, and this can happen over the next 2 to 3 years if brighter minds prevail.
Thank you so much. Enjoyed this Bow Tie Tuesday. We'll have to do something else in the future.
Absolutely.